ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां हयग्रीवम् उपास्महे. Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, and welcome to Heritage Utsav, brought to you by Gurucool in partnership with Skadush, your one stop shop for all extracurricular needs for your children. We're also co sponsored by SLR Retreat, your home away from home, hidden in the serene parts of Koli Hills, Tamil Nadu, and Cryogenic Engineers, energy efficient cooling solutions for the contemporary world. You can learn more about our sponsors in the description below. If you've ever walked into a temple or a monument and felt lost, not knowing how to appreciate the beauty in front of your eyes, this session is going to help you take that first baby step towards appreciating the gift our ancestors have left us. Today's guest is Dr. Chithra Madhavan, a veteran historian, archaeologist, iconographer, and epigrapher. She is the recipient of two postdoctoral fellowships from the Department of Culture, Government of India, and from the Indian Council of Historical Research, New Delhi. She is the author of 8 books on various topics, including history, culture, temples, sculptures, and more. Dr. Chitra has also co edited a book, South India Heritage An Introduction, containing approximately 500 articles on various aspects of the heritage and culture of South India. She has contributed about 100 articles on temple architecture and allied subjects to the multi volume Encyclopedia of Hinduism. She is a guest lecturer at Kalakshetra, Asian College of Journalism, and Dakshin Chitra. She frequently delivers lectures on temple architecture across India and leads heritage walks to various historical and archaeological sites in India. I'm already feeling out of breath recalling her achievements. It is my honor to welcome such an accomplished person to our show. Welcome, Dr. Chitra.
Thank you very much.
So, before we go into the big questions, I want to start with one question, which I'm pretty sure you have answered in many forums. We know you as a historian with specific interest in temple architecture and iconography. How did you choose history and archaeology as a subject to specialize on?
Well, it so happened that I was lucky in having very good history teachers in school, and that was one of the main reasons. The second is my parents took me on a holiday to various places in South India. Uh, this was perhaps when I was in the 8th standard. And we visited Sri Rangam, and we also visited the Hoysala temples near Mysore, in Belur and in Halebel. I was interested in history even before that, but once I saw these temples, I think I became somewhat of an addict, and I decided that I wouldn't and I couldn't do anything else. But then, you see, history is not a very favored subject for choice of profession, and there was a lot of opposition. Uh, People kept asking me, family, friends, neighbors, whoever kept asking, what will you do with history? What will you do? I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. It's just that I have to study. There's a compulsion within me. I have to study.
Oh, we are having a small technical glitch here. While we wait for Dr. Chitra to sign back in, we have a very quick, a few interesting facts about some temples around India. talk about some interesting facts. We will listen. We will watch.
Does the concept of karma apply to children also? If God have a friend, did ancient Indians invent aeroplane? Oh, Mrs. Chithra Madhavan, how come everyone is telling it?
Should one be vegetarian to practice yoga?
I'm a Hindu. My friend Anza is a Muslim. Why? Why do we do Pradakshana clockwise? Did kings give harsher punishment?
Sorry about the technical glitch. Yes, you were talking to us about your passion and interest for history and overcoming the hurdles of all the people who asked you about why history. So let's hear more about that.
Yeah, so that was it, and I went ahead. Uh, a lady who encouraged me a lot was Mrs. Y.G. Parthasarathy, who was the principal of Patna Seshatri School. And I've spoken about this many times, and those who heard me before will know what I'm going to say right now. It's just that I joined that school for a particular all arts group, which had history and Sanskrit and various other subjects. But then I suddenly got a letter, and I hadn't applied to any other school. I got a letter saying that, we are dropping this course because there are no takers, and we'll give you commerce and accounts instead. So there was a flood of tears. The last thing I wanted to study was commerce and accounts. I wanted history. I wanted Sanskritam. What was I to do? So my mother went to meet the person who had written the letter. He said Mrs. YGP was away from the country and could we wait for her to come back and have a talk with her. So we waited for her to come, and that was on the reopening day of the school. I fees and told her that this is what is happening. I have applied for a course, and you're giving me something else. It's what you promised me. So she looked at me in the eye and asked me whether this is really what I wanted to study, history. So I said, yes, that's what I want to study. I want to study in a CBSE school. I want a combination of history and Sanskritam. This is exactly what I want to do. And she said, okay, I'll make arrangements. Even if you're the only student, I'll create that course for you. And she did that. She did that. So I'm ever beholden to her for that.
Well, what conviction at the age of you must have been like what 16, 15, 16.
15. 15.
Yeah. So what conviction at that age? So what is it that you would tell children today if they want to take history? Have things changed at all from when you were wanting to do to now?
For the worse, perhaps. Because I really wouldn't recommend a child a teenager in India taking up history as a profession. There are very few opportunities other than becoming a lecturer or a professor. That's what you want to do, fine. But then again, how many job opportunities are there in the sector? I would much rather have youngsters develop a very, very deep interest in this subject, go ahead into other professions where they can, earn a very decent livelihood. Keep this as a very, very serious passion, a hobby. There are enough great archaeologists and historians who have done this by the side. There have been editors, there have been so many other people who have taken up to the study of history and archaeology with a very, very deep passion and deep conviction, made a huge name for themselves. I'm not quoting their names, but they've gone on to win awards, write books, given lectures on the international circuit. So that can be done if there is a passion.
Okay. It is rather a sad state of affairs because someone who wants to really take this up as a profession does not have an avenue to take this up and do good.
I
So,
agree.
he or she is being put to some kind of, a stressful thing. It's almost like having two careers at the same time. People struggle with even one, leave alone two. So it's a sad state of affairs indeed. So a follow-up question on that: are there things happening in the industry, in this space, by the government or other companies to increase job opportunities in this space?
I wouldn't say for history and archaeology per se, not per se, but in the field of tourism, yes, there are more opportunities than ever before. And if people could study, tourism in tandem with history, which is the in thing now, yes, then there are lots of opportunities. Mainstream history, really wouldn't recommend in India for youngsters. Now, if things are going to change for the better, I'll be the happiest person.
Definitely, definitely. Actually, I wanted to ask this question a little later, but because we are talking about job opportunities and all that, I want to touch base upon UNESCO as an organization. So we keep hearing a lot of information about many sites being added to this UNESCO World Heritage Center. Recently, we even read about this 13th century Kakatiya era Ramappa temple, the Rudreshwara temple, that was added to this list. Can you tell us a little more about this UNESCO as an organization? How big is it? How easy or difficult is it for a particular site to get added to this list? What goes into the process?
I am not into this mainstream, but however, I will share with you what I know. If a monument gets selected and enters the UNESCO World Heritage list, it's a huge honor because the world gets to know about that monument. For example, take this Kakatiya 13th century temple in Palampet, the Rudreshwara, also famously called the Ramappa temple. It's an absolute gem of Kakatiya architecture. It's a gem. But tell me, how many people actually know about it in India? So you have to go to Warangal, and from Warangal you have to drive down to Palampet, and there is this, you'll be stunned when you see it. It's so beautiful. But how many people actually know about it, and how many people take the trouble to go there? Now, when it enters the UNESCO World Heritage Site list, the whole world wakes up to it. So, when you want to visit a country, you want to see the best monuments first. You're not going to see the little ones. You're not interested in that. Or repeated visits, perhaps. But on the first visit, obviously, in any country, you want to see the best. And
Right.
you'll also know that in the World Heritage Site list, only the best are included. So if you were traveling in South India and you look up your guidebook, whichever guidebook is there, and it lists these are the UNESCO World Heritage Site, dash, 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 Tanjavur, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, Hampi, Pattadakkal, etc. Those are the places you will want to go to first. So it makes a huge difference on two counts. One, that it has entered, it is good enough, it's fantastic enough to enter that list and get inscribed on that list. Number two, visitors, tourists will make a beeline
Hmm.
for sure,
Hmm.
for sure. So there's a lot going for it. When you see that UNESCO World Heritage Site plaque in front of a monument, your heart soars. You feel so happy, and then you feel, oh, every other monument in India deserves this. And when are we going to get there?
Very true, very true. So, does India as a nation have something similar to the UNESCO? Do we publish that as well?
I'm not sure we have anything like that. However, the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI for short, a central government organization, takes care of many monuments in India, not just temples, forts, palaces, etc., etc., etc. So many are there. And when the ASI tag is there, it means it's a monument of national importance, and it is conserved and it is protected by people who know exactly how to do it.
Okay.
So that, if you look at the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites in India, all of them are under the Archaeological Survey of India. Because they, for example, in each state, the Archaeological Survey of India has a huge number of monuments. In Tamil Nadu, if I'm not mistaken, there are 400 plus, in fact.
Mhm. Wow, that's very impressive. Uh, slight detour. So you mentioned about temple. So we constantly keep hearing that a temple is actually a representative or representation of the whole universe. Why do we say that? What is so special about a temple?
Oh, so we do understand that in the universe there is a God. He can have a form, maybe he doesn't have a form, whatever. We know that there is Almighty. There is a superpower in this universe, and the entire universe is centered around that superpower. So whatever name you call him, whatever. So a temple basically in the center has the sanctum called the Garbhagriha in Sanskritam. And in that Garbhagriha is your deity. Vishnu or Shiva, Devi, Ganesha, whoever. And that is the main crux of a temple, like there is a superpower in this universe. Around that, you have peripheral shrines for various other deities. For example, you have the Navagrahas. All that is there in the universe. You have some, most times on the ceiling of the temple or on the pillars in the mantapa, you have representations of the Ashta Dikpalakas, the guardians of the eight different directions. You also have minor deities everywhere on the pillars, on the ceiling, on the walls, and sub shrines, etc., etc. These are all the beings that are there. You also have demi beings, the yakshas and the gandharvas and the kinnaras, the kimpurushas, etc. Semi divine beings are also there. Representation of ordinary men and women, musicians, dancers, clowns, gypsies, flowers, creepers, plants, animals, birds, reptiles, everything is there.
Hmm.
Everything that is could possibly be in the universe are represented in various parts of the temple, including erotic sculptures. So often, very often, I've been asked by students and various others, why should a temple, which is such a sacred place, meant for God, meant for worship, have erotic sculptures? There's absolutely nothing wrong at all. And here is the answer is there in your question itself. You said the temple is a miniature universe. So we say it's a microcosm of the macrocosm. So there is eroticism in the world. And in ancient and medieval India, they didn't fight shy of representing it in the temple. What is there is represented. If you can have a reptile on the ceiling, if you can have a leaf, a beautiful flower, a clown, a jester, what have you, you can also have erotic scenes. It's part of the universe. Whatever is there in the universe is represented here with the God, that superpower at the center. So this is why a temple is a miniature universe. And if we are going to see our temples from the perspective of some other culture,
Hmm.
I'm afraid that's a very wrong way of looking at our temples. We come from a very ancient civilization. We come from a very ancient culture. We have our own way of representing our tradition. And in that tradition, there is nothing to fight shy about by representing this and that in a temple. We are thinking of this as the cosmos, the entire cosmos brought to you here by the side of a river or on a mountain or an island, etc. That's how we have to view it. And if somebody else from somewhere else is going to tell you or make fun of this, we have to stand up, face them, and say, this is what it means.
Wow, wow, this is so fantastic. I recently happened to visit the Tanjavur Temple, and I had the uh, honor of being guided by Professor Devanayagam, sir. And he was explaining how the Gopuram and the thought process of the ruler was to actually build a Kailasam for his own men and women in in the kingdom, and he was explaining how, at the entrance on the gopuram there is Shiva, Parvati, or whatever we imagine to be the Kailasam, whatever the ruler imagined to be a Kailasam. So, it is so fascinating how you explain that whatever we see around us, whatever is happening around us, is what is depicted in the temple. So we must acknowledge that everything is natural. There's nothing to be shy about, right? As you rightly said, very very beautifully said. Now, when I was a kid, I used to enjoy visiting temples for many reasons, but the stone elephants and the prasadam were my attractive points. So I was like so thrilled to get on that stone elephant and take pictures and all that. Um, Now, how can temple visits be made extra fun for children, and how do we club that with learning? Like, I have a 2.5-year-old. When I take her to temple, what is it that I have to absolutely show her and make her start observing at this age itself?
Right, that's a very good question. There are fascinating aspects of temples that have to be taught to young minds. And once they absorb all of that, um, they'll find it very fascinating. So, first thing, let's make it clear. It's a religious institution, and that's the crux of the matter. Let's not take away anything from that. We go there to worship a god or a goddess. Let's uh, get that embedded in young minds. That done, we're going to look at very, very beautiful things. We're going to teach them about engineering, about architecture, about sculpture, about inscriptions, etc. Let's not go very deep into it in step one, otherwise they'll all run away, they'll hate this place. So we have to take it baby step by baby step. We have to take them up and up and up and up. And believe me, they like it. We've tried it, and yes, they come again and again. So you just look at them and tell them, look, there is this temple in front of you, and I'm making you the architect. All of you are the architects together. You're a team. You're going to work on, I'm the king. I've ordered you to build a temple in this place. How are you going to do it? So then, they'll come up with various ideas and very interesting ideas. Most of them may be wrong, but then you're going to encourage them and just pull them along your way. Where do you get these stones from? I mean, look around you. Where are the stones? There are no stones. So there is the nearest hill. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to procure the stones? And then they'll point here and there and say there's no hill. So there's no hill for the next 50 kilometers. So you have to go further, 60 kilometers away. And you're going to have to quarry, and then you have to carry, and then you have to build. Can you imagine the amount of effort that's gone in? And then you tell them about the Tanjavur Temple. It's going to a height of 60.9, almost 61 meters high, the Vimanam of the Tanjavur Temple. However, the foundation isn't that deep. I mean, it's hardly anything. So how did these were great engineers, these were great architects, these were great scholars in their own right, without degrees like we brandish now. And what about the sculptures? Can you imagine the hours and hours they would have spent perfecting their art before one sculpture got on the wall of one of those temples there? And what do these inscriptions mean? In what languages are they written? What scripts are they written? What do they say? Now, once you start eliciting answers from them, right or wrong, they're little children. They don't know what they're saying. We have to teach them. That's how we get them interested in this subject. Slowly draw them in. And it's a fascinating subject. It's absolutely fascinating. And the fact that these temples were once the centers of education, where the Veda Patashalas, not only Vedas, ancillary subjects, grammar, logic, etc., were taught. Veterinary science was probably also taught. And where did they study? How did they have access to books? I mean, what did they do for books? So they didn't have books then. They had back then manuscripts. Where were the manuscripts stored? How did they access them? So these are all little things that we have to teach them.
Right. Is it also true that the temples were also places where people were treated? It was almost like a hospital, and when they had invaders and all that, the forts around the temple are so big because they could safely put women and children inside. Is that also true?
Many temples had hospitals. For example, we hear of Arogya Shalai. hospital inside the Sri Temple. Uh, there are several inscriptions giving you details about that. So, yes, a temple could be a place where they could bring the entire population of that village inside, provided it was like the Sri Temple. But remember, most villages didn't have temples of that magnitude, that size. Many of them were small structures, and you couldn't pull the entire village inside. That wouldn't happen. So, while that could be an answer for some of the bigger temples in the country, not for most.
Okay.
However, there were granaries. You still have some of them standing, like again in the Sri Lankan temple and in some of the other smaller temples, huge storehouses where they could keep all the grains very safely and take them out in times of need, etc. etc.
Very interesting. So, in a lot of Western universities, we come across courses like art appreciation or music appreciation. So, if there is a course here in India titled Temple Appreciation 101 for children, what would you cover in it?
So we do have art appreciation courses in India now. I'm very happy to
Okay.
say that they seem to be booming. So a
Okay.
temple appreciation course would cover many things and depends on which age group we are looking at, and whichever age group, and it depends on the level. We are going to be looking at the various dynasties of India. We are going to be looking at temples in various regions with regional variations. We're going to be getting into exactly how these temples were built without getting into great technical details. Once you get into the technical details, I'm telling you, half the audience will flee. That will come at a higher level. We shouldn't get into all that. Like even in music, whatever appreciation, whichever art form, beginning, let's not bring in all the difficult jargon and all that. We'll keep that out for the time being. So basically tell them how the stones were arranged one on top of the other. Tell them why the inscriptions. Why would you write on the walls of temple? Why? What is the reason?
Right.
And the Europeans who were there in India had the gall to tell us that Indians did not have a sense of history. Pardon me, what are these inscriptions then if they didn't have a sense of history? So we did have a very strong sense of history. Many of these inscriptions are dated, names of rulers are given, the common people are given, so many details. All our history books are written based on inscriptions mostly. There are other sources also. So we have to explain to them the importance about the different scripts that are there in the different regions, the different languages that were used in different regions. Sanskritam being the lingua franca,
Hmm.
connecting from north to south, south to north, east to west, west to east. It was connecting the people. So yeah, if you take this to the lay audience, especially to the youngsters, the young students, it would be it would be fun. It would be a lot of learning also.
We've heard of levitating murtis in the Garbhagrahas, be it Somnath in the west or Sun Temple in the east. So, what's your take on it? Did they exist?
Entirely plausible. And though we don't have that now, yes, entirely likely. The kind of science that was there in ancient and medieval India is mind blowing. Mind blowing. If you just look at temple architecture, you can to build a temple like Konark, to build something like the Jagannath temple, to build something like the Modera Sun temple, we can just walk in and walk out.
Hmm.
If we just take, I'm just saying, 10 minutes to sit there by ourselves quietly and think about how these people in the 12th or 13th or 9th, whatever century, how they actually went about that work without all the things we have today, all the technical know how, expertise that we have, without any of that, you will understand that there's a huge science. So, levitating murtis, entirely likely.
Right. So, of all the temples you know and you visited, what must have been the most challenging temple to build, in your opinion? And why do you think so?
Very difficult to answer because you see, because you see, this is the way it is. Suppose, I'm just saying, I'm not saying this, and suppose I say it's the Tanjavur Temple. Suppose I say that we need to understand that it didn't come up by itself suddenly.
Correct.
There are like hundreds and hundreds of years of temple building activity before that temple came to be made. So Rajaraja suddenly didn't call one Stapati and say build. That
Correct.
Stapati took the knowledge of so many of his ancestors. The Pandya and the Pallava period temples were there. I'm just random names.
Right.
And before that, there was another legacy of building in wood. So it's come up over time. So if you take a temple of any one era, we can understand that they were drawing on the ancient practices that were there before their time. And so I wouldn't want to say that. So when the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram, because I'm in Tamil Nadu, I'm giving you examples from Tamil Nadu. When the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram was being constructed in the 8th century, it would have been a huge challenge. But when the Tanjavur temple was built 400 years later, it dwarfed the Kailasanatha temple. So we think, oh, this is a great engineering marvel. And then when Gopurams of greater height came to be built, oh, by the Vijayanagara and the Nayak rulers, oh, this is a great engineering marvel. So at each point of time in history, it has been a challenge for them.
Very interesting. Now we're going to go into a surprise, interesting segment, a rapid fire. So this is a very light-hearted talk. So we'll go very quickly on the questions. Pallavas or Choras, your favorite architects?
Why are you putting me through this? They're they're all my favorites, completely, and all of them. Why leave out the Pandyas? They're super temple
That's true.
builders.
Pandyas too. Okay, so you are at a temple now, and you see people littering the place and being very loud. What would you do?
I would walk up to them, be very polite, and tell them that they are in a very ancient site, and that it's very likely that all that has not been ingrained in them either by their families or by school. I would tell them that, and tell them to pick up whatever they have dropped and to speak a little more quietly, please. Could you do that? And if they didn't listen, I would just look around and call out, why are they trashing this place? Would you like this to happen to your homes? And aren't you here basically because you're respecting the God inside? Obviously, you've come to worship Him. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So why are you trashing the house of the Almighty? I've done this many times.
I'm sure you have.
It
That's
works.
probably one of the reasons I asked you that question as well, because a lot of times we also, kind of cringe. There are people who do it themselves, or people who see it, and we don't know how to respond to the situation. So thank you so much for guiding us. The next rapid fire. If you have to recommend three monuments in India as a must visit location, which ones would it be?
Very difficult. Very, very difficult.
What
My
comes
first,
at the top of your mind?
the Kailash Temple, Ellora,
Okay.
because that's a monolith. It's being hewn out of a hillside. Every part of it is made of the living rock, a living rock. It's incomplete. It's never been in worship. Oh, what the conception and the effort. Ellora. Look, I would like to mention each and every temple in India, but I would really like to do that. But you see, we have our favorites, and I have a whole list of favorites. So you said only three, and I would definitely go where my heart is on the island of Sri Rangam. That temple, I would say, is a must see, other than it being my favorite, because you see, it occupies a huge campus. It's the biggest living temple in the world, and also the fact that it's the architectural development there has grown over 2000 years, almost 2000 years of architectural growth. So you find each Gopuram, each Mandapam, each sanctum having been built at different eras.
Okay.
You have 4 pillared mantapams, you have a 1,000 pillar mantapam. In between, you have a 100 pillar mantapam, you have a 16 pillar mantapam. So it's it's a maze. It's a fantastic temple. 21 gopurams, 7 enclosures. That's akarams, number of mantapams, innumerable, 60 odd sannadhis, shrines. So that, for an entirely different reason, I would say, is a must visit. Konark. Oh, I mean, that's something else. How can I leave out Tanjavur? And if I leave out Tanjavur, I can't leave out Gangaikonda Cholapuram. If I do that, I can't leave out Darasanam. Please, you.
I'm actually going to come to that question. You can't answer that now because your next question is Darasuram, Gangaikonda Sorapuram, and Tanjavur, your personal favorite.
Gangaikonda Cholapuram.
Oh, okay.
Undoubted. I didn't even have to wait.
Brilliant temple. I would agree with you on that. So, one sculpture that mesmerized you the first time you saw it?
In Gangaikonda Cholapuram, the Chandesha Anugraha Murti, that is Shiva blessing his devotee Chandesha. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen it, zillion times. I've been to the temple that many times.
Right.
It's simply awesome. I don't have words to describe that.
It's very interesting. I don't know how true it is, but I was told that when author Kalki visited there, he went there and he took inspiration for his very famous novel Ponniyin Selvan from that particular sculpture as well. I don't know how true it is, but
I don't know either. But yes, if he was inspired by that sculpture, I mean, I can quite understand that.
Great. Your next question. One structure in India you have not visited, but you are desperate to visit.
Well, I see this happened many years ago. If you had asked me this about 15 years ago, or more than 15 years ago, I would have said Hampi. Somehow, several visits which I had planned didn't materialize to Hampi. I mean, I really wanted to go, but I couldn't go. And then after that, I've been going year on year after year. That's a different thing. Where have I? Well, I've the smaller monuments across the smaller temples of Orissa, perhaps. And we've always seen the bigger ones. We've seen Jagannath Ji, we've seen Lingaraja, we've seen the Konark Temple, but there are some gems, smaller temples in Orissa that I would love to see. Mount Abu, though I've been there, I haven't seen it well enough. The Jain temples of Mount Abu, I would like to go there yet again. Marthand is a place in Kashmir. Then Marthand itself means sun, Surya, and there was once a huge Surya temple there, and only the remains are there now, very, very badly damaged. Yes, that's one place the ruins of Marthand, I would love to see.
Great. Okay, so now you are given unlimited funding and you are asked to choose one monument or temple in India to restore. Which one would you pick?
Whoa!
We did a lot of homework, huh?
Oh, yes, you have. I can see, and it's getting more and more challenging. Okay, you see, there are, again, because I live in Tamil Nadu and I have gone to the smallest of villages here, there are some early Chola temples which are crying for attention. And these early Chola temples belonging to the 10th century are real gems. You won't see the huge temples that you see in Tanjavur and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, Darasuram, etc. No, these are small. But I repeatedly use the word they are gems. They have miniature sculptures. Think about 10th century miniature sculptures in granite, and the details can be seen even today. So there are many of those temples that are languishing by way of worship, by way of conservation, maintenance, in every which way they are languishing. And those are the temples I would like to use the funds that you are so generously giving me on. May your words come true.
Absolutely. We also wish. One last rapid fire. Name one ruler from our past who you think would make a great leader for our country in today's circumstances.
Rajendra Chola.
Rajendra Sora and not Rajaraja Sora.
No,
Very
I am a fan
interesting.
of
I
Rajendra
want to
Chola.
know more. Why would you say Rajendra Chora?
Because you know enough about Raja. See, your immediate response, like everybody else's response, is why not Raja Chola? Because you
Correct.
know enough about Raja Chola already, and the life of Rajendra, for some reason, hasn't evoked that kind of response that Raja's life has. Though I don't know why. I can
Hmm.
tell you that he was as great as his father.
Hmm.
In certain matters, maybe not as great, but in certain ways, greater still. And I basically would like to see Rajendra there.
Okay.
I think
If
we
you
need
can
him.
tell me a little more about, because I know Rajendra was actually a scholar in Mimamsa, if I recall the reading, that he was very well versed, but then he did not quite focus heavily on taking that as, primary subject. So we see when we hear about Raja Chola, we hear about him, his architecture, of course, the Tanjavur Temple, and his administrative capabilities. So it's almost like, he made like a blueprint in those 14 years when, he was not ruling, when he crowned his uncle, and he was not ruling, and then he traveled, he made a blueprint, and then he executed. So it was almost like a father son duo, who literally did the whole thing. But if you compare them as individual rulers, what makes Rajendra Sura very special? I'm not even asking in comparison to Raja. What is it that he did that made him really special?
Uh, See, while we may not like wars, we don't like those things, but it was also the dharma of a king to wage wars. I mean, they had to expand their territory, they had to protect their territories. So he was an exceptionally bold ruler. And one of the very, very few kings of South India who ventured north and as far north as the river Ganga, which got for him the name Gangaikonda Chola.
Hmm.
And he also went as far east as Kadaram, Kedah in Malaysia, and he got the name Kadaram Kondan also. And these are victories that he had, huge victories. The naval might of the Cholas was there. The army went all the way there. And let us agree on the fact that we remember most kings because of their conquests. Maybe Samudragupta or Chandragupta Maurya, Krishnadevaraya. If they had not waged wars, if they had not been victorious, we would hardly remember them today. For example, the immediate predecessor of Rajaraja Chola, Madurantaka Uttama Chola, who ruled for about 14 years, constructed ever so many temples and gave ever so many bronzes. Do we remember him? No.
Hmm.
So let's agree on the fact that we remember emperors and kings because of their victories, because of their conquests. In that sense, Rajendra stands head and shoulders above many a king in India, especially in South India. And the fact that he's left behind a temple like Gangaikonda Cholapuram for us. You're seeing it in a very dilapidated condition today. The compound wall has gone, the two gopurams have gone, much has gone. I'm not getting into the whys and wherefores, but much is gone. But I feel if we had seen this temple in its glorious years and it was built before all the damage happened, it would have given Tanjavur a run for its money.
I'm sure I would agree with that, because the aerial view of that temple is so beautiful. You have a lake on one side, and then it's fields everywhere. It is just so beautiful.
Gorgeous, yes.
Yeah, it is
And that
gorgeous.
Rajendra created one of the largest man-made lakes in India. It was called Chola Gangam. It is said that the waters of the Ganga that was brought from the Ganga was poured into that lake. It was called Chola Gangam. It's called Ponneri today. The size has shrunk. But people who visit Gangekonda Cholapuram and who go to this temple don't go to that Ponneri. They should go and see it. I mean, to have created such a huge, huge lake, an artificial lake for irrigation in the 11th century is something fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I mean, he was also an administrator. So Rajaraja is always spoken of, is always written of as a great administrator. Never for a moment will I take away from that. He was an amazing administrator. He brought about many, many new innovations, many new things to his governance. Let us also again pause for a moment, and I'm not taking away from Rajaraja's greatness. All I'm trying to say was much of it was there ahead of his time, which he took to very, very great heights, like he literally did to the Tanjavur Temple. There were many temples, and he took it to lofty heights. The same thing he did for administration. Now, successors have a very serious difficulty. And you have a predecessor, you have a father like Raja. What are you going to do to measure up to that?
Right.
It always happens teacher, student, mother, son, father, son, mother, daughter. If you have to measure up, it's even tougher than what the predecessor had. So,
Very
Rajendra had to measure up, and measure up he did.
amazing, amazing answer. So I think I'm now going to go ahead, dig up and read more about Rajendra
Do
because
that.
I know now about Rajaraja to immediately have that reaction, but I really am going to go ahead and read about Rajendra. So we
You
have
won't
a
regret it.
few we have a few questions from our audience who are watching us on YouTube live now. Um, why is the value of temples slowly degrading in today's world when compared to a few decades back? This is a question from Mahia.
I wouldn't say that it's degrading at all. Why do you say that? Please explain. I mean, why do you say it's degrading?
I don't know. We are not able to get more.
Okay,
It's not
okay, it's all
interactive, but
right.
it's her his or her
Her
feeling that
perception.
it is degrading. So you don't
I
think it
wouldn't
is
think so.
degrading?
No,
It's
not at
actually
all. More than ever before, you have multitudes of people visiting temples for worship. More than ever before. I mean, temples are teeming with worshippers. More than ever before, you're having younger people who, because of initiatives like Gurucool, etc., youngsters who are walking into temples wanting to learn about it. More and more, the layman is getting interested in temple architecture, sculpture, inscriptions, rather than just a handful of scholars who were specializing on this topic. More and more people are beginning to realize about the greatness of the architectural and sculptural tradition of India. Many more books, many more documentaries, etc., are being made. In fact, I feel that much more than before, there is a focus on temples. So I'm not sure I can agree with the statement that they are now degraded.
it is actually very, very heartwarming and encouraging to hear that answer. The next question we have is from Anand. Which is better, a living temple or a historical temple? So, for example, a historical temple may not have regular worship, but preserved with manicure lawns.
Some all temples, unless they are very newly built, are historic. Even those temples in active worship are historic. Tirupati temple, I mean, there's no temple that's more in worship. So that's also very, very, very historic temple. It's been mentioned in Sangam literature itself. Very ancient literature mentions it. So it's not as though only the temples that are worship that are in worship are also historic.
Hmm.
What you mean is living temples versus temples that are only monuments and not in worship. I think that's the difference that you're trying to make. Both are historic, both are of archaeological importance, both are there.
But for example, like
The
even
thing
Kailash
when you
Natha temple, which has become more of a monument now.
it has, but there is worship.
Okay,
100%. It is historic, it is in worship, is what I'm
got
trying to say. If you think of the Tanjavur Temple, most people, or Gangaikonda Cholapuram, or whatever temple, you think of it as historic, correct. But it's also in worship.
Understood.
So temples that are in active worship are also historic. That's the point I'm trying to make. Just because there are manicured lawns and it looks forlorn, it doesn't mean only those are ancient. Only those are of historical importance. That statement won't stand. So um, both are important. The inscriptions that you have on the walls of the perennially crowded Tirupati temple are as important as the inscriptions that you'll find on a forlorn, non-worshipped temple in some obscure village in some part of the country. Both are important.
Very interesting. So it is said that there are major Shiva temples built over many centuries, aligned along one longitude line around 79 degrees. The Chidambaram, Tiruvannamalai, Kedarnath, Srikalahasti. How could they have envisioned this and built it over a period?
I have seen this WhatsApp message doing the rounds. However, I have not verified it.
Okay.
I'm not 100. I'm sure it's correct, but I'm not sure whether it's been authenticated. And if it is true, somehow I'm not at all surprised because our ancients had a fantastic sense of geography, astrology, astronomy, so many things. They knew much. It has also been documented. We haven't taken the trouble to find out how much they knew and how much they have handed over to us for
Mm.
posterity, for us to take care of. It's our fault for not going into it and studying it and then passing it on to the next generation. There's been a gap, there's been a lapse. It's our fault, it's not their fault. They've documented it well. So while I'm not 100% sure of how true this is, if it's true, I'm not surprised, given the genius of the ancient Indian.
Wonderful. So we're at the fag end of the interview. I just have two last questions. Uh, Sorry, we read in the news about murtis, sculptures being stolen, lost, and even retrieved. In fact, in one of the experts we had in But Why series that we just we are celebrating the 100th video of that. Now we had Mr. Vijay Kumar come and talk to us about
Yes.
a lot of things like this. Now, what can we do as individuals to mitigate this problem of stealing the murtis?
I think Vijay is the best person to have answered this question, given the fact that he has worked so hard and so passionately for this cause. And he's the one that has been repeatedly telling us in interviews, in articles, in lectures that we need to photograph many of the sculptures that we have in temples. And
Yes.
that's a document, that's a proof of what we have, so that in case it goes out and to retrieve it, you have this evidence that it was there on this niche, in this niche, on the wall of this temple. Yeah, I listened to the expert, and that's what he said.
Great. All right. So one last question before we wrap up. What is the most captivating story behind a sculpture or a custom at a temple that made you go wow?
Very challenging. So, some story behind some sculpture. Okay. I don't have enough time to think, otherwise, I may have come up with a better answer. But you see, there is a Dwarapalaka. Oh, no, no, this is even better. This is even better. So, I'm thinking, as you can see, I'm thinking, there is a sculpture in the Madras Museum,
Hmm.
and it is very badly damaged. His arms aren't there, and he is Balakrishna, he is baby Krishna. He's sitting there in one corner of the stone sculpture gallery in the Madras Government Museum in a place called Egmont. Nobody looks at him. Very unfortunate, because you see, that baby Krishna was created in Odisha, and he was worshipped in a temple in the fort called Udayagiri.
Hmm.
Till in the 16th century, Krishnadevaraya, the famous Vijayanagara emperor, monarch, went there and conquered the then king of that place, a Gajapati ruler, and took control of the fort of Udayagiri, fell in love with that image of Krishna, brought him all the way to his capital city, Vijayanagar, now Hampi, on the banks of the river Tungabhadra, and installed him, consecrated him in that temple. And when bad days befell Hampi, that image was taken out of the sanctum, thrown outside, and his arms broke. And later he was taken by archaeologists, brought to Madras, now Chennai, and stored in this Madras museum. So you see, he's come all the way from Odisha, Udaygiri in Odisha, to ancient Vijayanagara, and now to Chennai. So this is an image that has traveled a lot. So that is one of the stories that is very close to my heart.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So, everyone who's watching this, if you are in Chennai, please make a visit. Of course, after the
Please.
COVID times, please make a visit to the museum, take precautions, and see this particular sculpture and remember the story that you just heard. I have 100 more questions, but I know we are up, and 1 hour is just too less for all the questions that I have in my mind. But I do hope that we are able to hear you again and more often on our platform, Dr. Chitra. Our heartfelt thanks to our title sponsor, Skadoosh, and our event sponsors, SLR Retreat and Cryogenic Engineers. We thank everyone for joining us today. Join us for another exciting conversation on the art of storytelling tomorrow with Srimati Vishaka Hari. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've enjoyed every moment of being with all of you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.